this is the way that I tend to think about it, right, is that basically in World War II, you had these two authoritarian regimes, these two kind of monstrous regimes that caused massive amounts of death. You had the Nazis and the communists. You had Stalin and Hitler, and those two at the outset were allied together, and then they split, and we ended up beating the Nazis. But the secret, the one that we don't say so much, we say because we ask the question, who won the war, right? The Allies won the war. The good guys won the war. But that's not absolutely true. It's not completely true, right? We allied ourselves with a horrible demon in order to fight another horrible demon, right? But that's difficult to sustain as a story, right? It's easier if you want to found a world to say, it's pretty simple, right? The good guys won, the bad guys lost. That's the story. That's what we're going with. It's founded the modern world. It brought about a move towards the end of history, like all of that kind of frame. And so what happened is that although in the United States, there was a little moment where people resisted communism, right, in the early 50s, that went away very fast. And by the end of the 50s and the early 60s, there was already a kind of incursion of communist thinking into America.
Okay, so you're putting that on the fact that we didn't properly assimilate or fully understand what had happened.
Yeah, but the thing is that I'm not judging anyone. There's
no judgment in this. I'm just trying to understand.
There's no other way to do it, right? And so in order to found a world, you need to have a kind of clear myth that creates it. But most worlds have hidden sins in them. They have hidden dark sides to that. And those hidden sins, they get kind of pushed to the side in order to give thrust to a story. But at some point, those sins, they start to show themselves, and then they start to affect the world, right? And if you don't become conscious of them at some point, they can just eat you up, like they start to devour you. And so I think that that's the best way of understanding it, is that there was a good reason to frame the world the way that we did in order to give rise to the modern world that we live in. That was a world of amazing prosperity that brought about great freedoms, that brought about great creativity, that did some wonderful things. But there was a kind of weird secret in that world, which is, and it's not it sounds very like I'm being mystifying. It's not mystifying. So you think about it like, once you set that up and you say Hitler is the devil, right? And he's a good candidate for the devil, right? But you say he's the devil of this world, and everything that's related to the Nazis and to fascism is completely forbidden, right? You have no access to it. You can't bring it up. You can't talk about it. You can't identify with it. None of that is possible, okay? But because of this weird secret sin in the beginning of the story, the communist imagery doesn't get the same treatment. There's a little door that's open. Mm-hmm. And then that door, right, through the flooding in of left-wing intellectuals into our university system, in our education system, that door starts to open and open and open. And so there's place for that discourse, but there's no place for the other one. And so what it does is means that history from that point, for a certain amount of time, is always leftward lurching, inevitably. Because, and what happens is that the things that are forbidden about the Nazis, they increase, right? So at first it's strict Nazi imagery, right? You can't bring that up. You can't show it. You can't identify with it. But then what happens is slowly everything that's related that can be stuck to it starts to be part of that story, right? So it's not just that people that, like, let's say, strictly identified with Nazism, that were in the party for the whole time and celebrated the chancellor and did all that, those people, obviously they're forbidden. But soon it's like, well, now Heidegger is forbidden. Because Heidegger was in the party for a little while, and even though he opposed it or didn't follow it after, oh, no, you can't have Heidegger. Mm-hmm. And then later it's like, well, actually anything that is trying to show that a nation, European nation, is great, or you can't have that because that's Nazism. Then all the imagery in the US that's from the South, because that's racism, now it's not even about the Civil War. It's actually framed in World War II mythology. You can't have that. So Confederate flag, out. All that, out. Nationalism, out. Anything that celebrates European identity starts to get pushed out, okay? So it grows.
Now, is that, do you think, parallel to the further away in time you are from an event, the less complex it, or the sort of simpler and low definition it becomes as it's in the distance, and so it becomes a kind of increasingly a goody baddie dichotomy. And when you're in the middle of it, it's incredibly complex, and you're aware of how complex it is because you're trying to deal with. You want to make the right decisions, and so it's foolish to do a goody baddie sort of dichotomy. Yeah. But the further in time it is, the further away from the World War II we fall prey to that.
I think there's part of that, but I think another aspect of it is something like you plant a seed, right? And you plant a certain seed and it has a certain shape, and at first the consequences of that seed look very small, but then as time goes, the fruits of that start to show themselves, and the thrust of the narrative has a direction, and it's hard to stop it once it started, right? And so you have this growing suspicion towards anything that is related to identity. And then that finds its reflection in all kinds of different discourse. It's related to ethnic questions, to race, like more specifically, then to gender, then to sexuality. Then all of a sudden having a family is fascist, then, et cetera. Like it just keeps going. Anything that is in some ways normal identity, in the sense of an identity that has a kind of stance, gets tossed out, right?
If anyone listening thinks that that's you saying having a family is fascist is a joke, look at what the BLM organization were writing. In 2020. They were explicitly against the nuclear family. Yeah. So that is very much part of that narrative.
And so it's important to see that. And then, like I said, the rest, on the other side, the space for the anti-identity position starts to grow and starts to take on multiple shapes. A good example, and then so now it's so bad that during the COVID demonstrations in Canada is a really great example of that, right? So you have a demonstration, and then what seems to most people at this point is that they send a Fed in to the demonstration with a Nazi flag, and everybody in the demonstration is angry and is like telling this guy to leave, and he's wearing a mask and he's not showing himself. They're telling him to leave. So finally, after, I don't know how long he was there, I don't know, 15 minutes, whatever, he leaves. But that's it for that demonstration. Mm-hmm. Now it's a Nazi demonstration forever in the media landscape.
Yes.
But in the counter demonstration, there were communist flags all over. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It's not a big deal, even though the communists obviously slaughtered insane amounts of people. And the prisons in Romania or in Russia, or the Gulag in Russia, was just decades of torture and slaughter and murder.
And it was explicit in the Marxist literature. Marx himself wrote about this. I just colour that in with more examples. So Posey Parker, who's a women's rights activist here in Britain, did a tour of Australia, and there were some Nazis or black-clad sort of protester-style things around. And even though she distanced herself from them, said she had nothing to do with them, the whole thing got tarred that way. But also on the left, I remember seeing Jeremy Corbyn, former leader of the Labour Party, when he was running in both 2017 and 2019 to the general election to be Prime Minister. He would protest, and there would be not only Hezbollah flags behind him, but also hammer and sickle. And, in reverse, if anyone on the political right had any sort of flag with any Nazi imagery, any swastika like that, game over. Yeah. Or at the very least, he would have come out and be like, I have nothing to do with that. With Corbyn, there's just a double standard on the left. And I totally agree, even though, numbers wise, there's an argument that communism killed a hell of a lot more than fascism.
Yeah. After the trucker protest, when we had Canada Day, like our celebration, national holiday, Trudeau forbade the use of the Canadian flag in our national holiday.
What?
Because nationalism, fascism, right? And so the reason why I talk about this is that we've reached this breaking point where at some point it's untenable. It's untenable in all kinds of ways. This narrative cannot continue forever, and at the same time, for example, how can I say this? Like, even though Hitler is a very evil person and did very evil things, he cannot be the devil forever. That is not possible. He can't play that role forever in our story. He can't, because not only is Hitler the devil, he's worse than the devil. Like, if I call you a devil, you might get annoyed, but if I call you Hitler, you might punch me. Like, that's how bad it is to actually use that term. It's the worst thing you can call anyone. So if you want to go against Trump, you don't call him the devil. You call him Hitler. That's how you characterize someone as the most evil thing that humanity has ever imagined. Now, the problem is that Hitler is not that. The devil is much worse than Hitler. And even saying that, it's funny because in my video, I said that. And some people in the comments said, when you said that, I felt uneasy, as if I'm not allowed to think that.
Yeah, I feel uneasy listening. It's weird,
right?
then. Yeah.
It's weird, but it's like, that's actually true, right? The devil is worse than Hitler. The devil is the incarnation of everything that's evil in the world. Hitler is a very particular manifestation of that evil in a very particular place. And so there's no way that he can play that role forever. And I think that, because of the fact that in some ways the memory of World War II is changing because people are dying, now everything is shaking. And so you can understand that there are some people that are in some way saying, we have to be able to recapture the other side. We have to take it back somehow. Because the problem is, you can't, let's say if you're right-leaning, and you know that I can destroy you by showing that a friend of a friend of a friend of a friend of yours is hard right. And I can destroy your career just by that, it doesn't matter how many steps. You could find as many steps as you want. If I can find a connection between you and some kind of fascism, I could destroy your life.
Yeah.
And so that's untenable. And so what you're seeing, and it's very uneasy, and it's hard to, and it's almost intuitive. I don't know how many people are doing it on purpose, but you can see people are saying, we have to reclaim some of this imagery in order to free ourselves from that problem.
Thanks for watching this clip from The Winston Marshall Show. You can click here to watch the full episode, and for more clips like this one, don't forget to subscribe. And as always, be well.